Want to know why your relationships keep failing? It's not bad luck. It's not that all women are crazy or all men are jerks. It's 5 specific habits you do every single day that are destroying your love life. And the worst part? You probably think these habits are helping you. You think you're protecting yourself or being reasonable, but you're actually sabotaging every relationship you touch. I'm going to show you exactly what these 5 deadly habits are and how to stop them before they kill your next relationship too. Here's what you're getting in the next 40 minutes. I'm going to break down 5 deadly habits that are killing your love life right now. Not relationship advice like be a better listener or show more affection. I'm talking about deep cognitive habits, the ways you think about love, relationships, yourself, and other people that make lasting happiness impossible. Most relationship advice focuses on behavior. Do this, say that, act this way. That's all surface level. It might help temporarily, but it doesn't fix the root problem. The root problem is how you think. And if your thinking is irrational, your relationships will always be disasters, no matter how hard you try. These 5 habits come from irrational beliefs you learned growing up. From your parents, from culture, from movies and fairy tales that sold you lies about how love works. And now, these habits run automatically in the background of your mind, sabotaging your relationships without you even knowing it. Here's what makes this different from other relationship advice. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to show you what to stop thinking. Because when you change these 5 cognitive habits, your behavior changes naturally. You don't have to force it. You don't have to remember techniques. You just think differently, and therefore you act differently. By the end of this video, you'll be able to identify all 5 habits in yourself. You'll understand exactly why they're destroying your relationships. And you'll have specific disputation methods to eliminate them. This is cognitive restructuring, the most powerful tool in psychology for permanent change. Let's begin. The first deadly habit that's killing your love life is something I call demandingness. And it's probably the most toxic habit on this list because it destroys relationships from the inside out. Let me explain what I mean. Demandingness is the habit of turning preferences into demands. You take something you want, affection, attention, sex, respect, whatever, and you mentally upgrade it from I want this to I must have this, or they should give me this, or they have to do this. The moment you make that shift from preference to demand, you create misery. Why? Because demands create anger when they're not met. And in relationships, your demands will not always be met. That's reality. People are imperfect. They forget things. They have bad days. They prioritize differently than you. When you're operating from demands, every disappointment becomes a crisis. Listen to how you talk about your relationships, either out loud or in your head. Do you use words like should, must, have to, need to, ought to? These are demand words. She should text me back faster. He must remember our anniversary. They have to respect my feelings. She needs to be more affectionate. Every one of these is a demand. And every demand sets you up for anger and disappointment. The rational alternative is preference language. I prefer she texts back quickly, but she doesn't have to. I want him to remember our anniversary, but it's not a requirement for my happiness. See the difference? Same desire, completely different emotional impact. You turn preferences into demands because it makes you feel more in control. If you demand something, it feels like you have a right to it, like the universe owes it to you. This is an illusion. You don't have a right to another person's behavior. You have a right to your own standards and boundaries. You can choose to stay or leave based on whether your needs are met. But you don't have a right to demand someone be different than they are. When you operate from this illusion of control, you make yourself chronically angry because reality keeps violating your demands. Here's what happens in relationships when you're demanding. Your partner feels it. Even if you don't say it out loud, they sense your expectation that they must behave a certain way. This creates pressure. They feel like they're constantly being evaluated, constantly failing to meet your standards. Over time, this builds resentment. They start to feel like you don't love them for who they are, only for what they do for you. And they're right. Because demandingness is conditional, you're essentially saying I'll only be happy if you meet my demands. That's not love. That's a transaction. The way to break the habit of demandingness is to practice what I call radical preference. Take every demand you have and consciously convert it to a preference. Not as a technique or a game, but as a genuine shift in thinking. You truly accept that you prefer certain things, but you don't require them to be okay. I prefer my partner to be affectionate, but I can be happy without constant affection. I prefer they remember important dates, but I don't need that to feel loved. This doesn't mean you have no standards. It means your happiness isn't held hostage by whether your preferences are met. Let me tell you about a client who came in furious because his girlfriend forgot his birthday. He was convinced this proved she didn't love him, that she should have remembered, that it was unacceptable. Through REBT, we examined his demand. She must remember my birthday, or it means she doesn't care. We disputed it. Must she? Where's that written? Can someone forget a date and still care deeply? Obviously, yes. His anger wasn't about the forgotten birthday. It was about his demand that she prove her love in this specific way. When he converted the demand to a preference, I wish she'd remembered, but she's human and humans forget things. His anger dissolved. They talked about it calmly. She apologized, and the relationship continued. The birthday was still forgotten, but he didn't make himself miserable about it. Right now, write down 3 demands you have in your relationship or about relationships in general. Use the format they must or they should. Now take each demand and dispute it. Where's the evidence they must do this? Can they still be a good person without doing this? Even if they don't do this, can I still be okay? Then rewrite each demand as a preference. I prefer they do this, but I don't require it for my happiness. Notice how different that feels emotionally. Let me give you the most common demands I see that destroy love. They must never disappoint me. They should always understand me. They have to make me feel secure. They must prioritize me above everything else. They should never change. Every single one of these is irrational and will create constant anger. People will disappoint you. They won't always understand you. Your security comes from you, not them. They have other priorities besides you. And people change. That's called being alive. Accept these realities or stay miserable forever. Demandingness turns love into obligation and kills joy. But there's a second habit that's even more insidious because it's usually invisible. You don't even realize you're doing it, but it's poisoning every interaction you have. The second deadly habit is awfulizing. This is when you take something bad and make it awful, terrible, catastrophic, the end of the world. And I see this in almost every relationship problem that walks through my door. People are convinced that normal relationship difficulties are absolute disasters. Let me break this down. Awfulizing is the cognitive distortion where you exaggerate the badness of events. Something disappointing happens, they don't text back, they criticize you, they forget something important, and your mind immediately jumps to this is terrible, this is awful, this is unbearable. But here's the thing, very few relationship problems are actually awful. Most are just inconvenient, annoying, or disappointing. Awful means something like terminal cancer or watching your child die. That's awful. Your partner being late to dinner? Not awful. Annoying, yes. Inconvenient, sure, but not awful. When you awfulize, you create emotions that are disproportionate to reality. And those exaggerated emotions drive destructive behavior. Here's how awfulizing works in your head. Something happens. Maybe your partner snaps at you. Your mind immediately starts escalating. They snapped at me. This is bad. Actually, this is really bad. This means they don't respect me. This is terrible. What if they always treat me this way? This is awful. I can't be with someone who treats me this way. This relationship is doomed. Notice how the mind took one moment of irritation and built it into a relationship-ending catastrophe. That's awfulizing. And it happens in seconds, automatically, unless you train yourself to catch it. When you awfulize, you create massive emotional distress over minor problems. You're walking around with anxiety, anger, and depression levels that would be appropriate if your house was burning down, but you're actually upset because they didn't like your dinner suggestion. Your emotional life becomes exhausting because everything feels like a crisis. This makes you difficult to be with. Your partner has to walk on eggshells because they never know what minor thing will trigger your next catastrophic reaction. Eventually, they either leave or they shut down emotionally to protect themselves. Most people who awfulize don't do it just in relationships. They do it everywhere. Traffic is awful. Work is awful. Bad weather is awful. Everything is awful. This is a cognitive habit you learned probably from a parent who modeled dramatic thinking. And like all habits, it runs automatically unless you consciously interrupt it. The good news? Habits can be changed. But first, you have to catch yourself doing it, which most people never do because they genuinely believe their awfulizing is accurate. Here's how to break the awfulizing habit. When something happens and you start thinking it's awful or terrible, stop and reality check. On a scale of 0 to 100, where 0 is no problem and 100 is the worst thing that could possibly happen to a human, where does this actually fall? Your partner forgot to call? Maybe a 5. They criticized your cooking? Maybe a 10. They cheated on you? Maybe a 70. Even cheating, while genuinely very bad, isn't the worst thing that can happen. It's not your child dying. It's not you getting terminal cancer. This isn't minimizing real pain. It's proportionalizing. When you see things accurately, your emotions become appropriate to the situation. The alternative to awfulizing is accurate evaluation. Instead of this is awful, try this is unfortunate. Instead of this is terrible, try this is disappointing. Instead of this is unbearable, try this is uncomfortable. These aren't just word games. They're accurate descriptions that lead to healthier emotions. Disappointment is much easier to handle than despair. Annoyance is easier than rage. When you evaluate situations accurately, you respond proportionally. And proportional responses solve problems instead of creating new ones. Let me share the case of a woman who came in convinced her relationship was over because her boyfriend didn't want to spend Christmas with her family. In her mind, this was awful, terrible, proof that he didn't really love her, a sign of fundamental incompatibility. We examined whether it was actually awful. He had good reasons. He wanted to see his own family, and they'd agreed to alternate holidays. Was it disappointing? Yes. She'd hoped he'd come. But was it relationship ending? Only if she made it so. We worked on converting her awfulizing to accurate evaluation. It's disappointing he won't be there, but it's not a catastrophe. We can celebrate together another day. Her anxiety dropped immediately. The relationship continued. Think of something in your relationship that you currently think is awful or terrible. Write down all the awfulizing thoughts you have about it. Then challenge each one. Is this really awful, or is it disappointing? Is this really unbearable, or is it just uncomfortable? What's the actual evidence that this is catastrophic? Then rewrite your evaluation accurately. This is a 10 out of 100 on the badness scale. It's not what I wanted, but it's manageable. Watch how your emotional intensity drops when you stop awfulizing. Some people think I'm telling them to minimize real problems or pretend everything's fine. I'm not. If your partner is abusive, that's genuinely very bad and you should leave. If they're consistently disrespectful, that's a real problem worth addressing. But there's a difference between acknowledging real problems and awfulizing them. You can say this behavior is unacceptable to me without saying this is the worst thing ever. You can set boundaries without catastrophizing. Accurate evaluation allows you to take appropriate action instead of drowning in exaggerated emotion. Awfulizing makes everything worse than it is and creates unnecessary suffering. But the third deadly habit is one that most people actually think is a good thing. They think they're being self-aware or protective, but they're actually destroying their relationships from a completely different angle. The third deadly habit is what I call low frustration tolerance, or I can't stand it-itis. This is the belief that you can't tolerate discomfort, that you can't stand being frustrated or disappointed. And this habit kills relationships faster than almost anything because it makes you impossible to be with. Let me show you why. Low frustration tolerance is the irrational belief that you cannot bear discomfort. When something frustrating happens in your relationship, you tell yourself, I can't stand this, or this is unbearable, or I can't take this anymore. But here's the logical question. Are you standing it? Right now, in this moment, are you tolerating it? Yes, obviously, because you're still here, still functioning. So the belief I can't stand it is demonstrably false. You can stand it. You're standing it. You just don't like it. And that's the key difference. Not liking something is very different from not being able to stand it. In relationships, low frustration tolerance shows up as an inability to handle normal relationship discomfort. Your partner is in a bad mood. I can't stand when they're like this. They want alone time. I can't handle feeling ignored. They're stressed about work and not paying attention to you. This is unbearable. You have a disagreement. I can't take this conflict. Every normal relationship challenge becomes framed as something you can't tolerate. This creates a pattern where you either blow up, shut down, or avoid any situation that's uncomfortable. And guess what? Relationships are full of uncomfortable situations. If you can't tolerate discomfort, you can't maintain intimacy. Low frustration tolerance comes from an underlying entitlement belief. You believe you shouldn't have to tolerate discomfort. That life, and especially your relationship, should be comfortable at all times. This is completely irrational. Discomfort is a normal part of life. Relationships involve two different people with different needs, different moods, different preferences. Conflict is inevitable. Disappointment is inevitable. If you walk around believing you shouldn't have to tolerate any of this, you're going to be chronically miserable. And you're going to make your partner miserable too, because they have to tiptoe around keeping you comfortable all the time. Here's why low frustration tolerance is so destructive. It prevents you from working through problems. Every relationship has issues that need to be addressed. But addressing issues is uncomfortable. It requires difficult conversations. It requires sitting with tension. It requires tolerating the other person being upset or disappointed. If you have low frustration tolerance, you avoid all of this. You sweep problems under the rug. You change the subject. You get angry and storm out. You do anything to escape the discomfort, which means problems never get solved. They just accumulate until the relationship collapses under the weight of unresolved resentment. Low frustration tolerance leads to two types of avoidance. Physical avoidance. You literally leave the room, the house, the relationship when things get uncomfortable. And emotional avoidance. You shut down, go numb, detach emotionally to escape feeling the discomfort. Both types destroy intimacy. Your partner learns they can't bring up problems because you can't handle it. They can't show you their struggles because you can't tolerate the discomfort of supporting someone. They have to hide parts of themselves to keep you comfortable. Eventually, there's no real relationship left. Just two people performing happiness to avoid discomfort. The antidote to low frustration tolerance is deliberately practicing discomfort tolerance. This means consciously staying in uncomfortable situations instead of escaping. Your partner wants to talk about a problem. You stay in the conversation even though it's uncomfortable. You feel disappointed or frustrated. You sit with that feeling instead of demanding it change immediately. You disagree about something. You tolerate the tension instead of forcing resolution or fleeing. This is hard, but it's the only way to build the capacity for real intimacy. You literally have to practice standing things you think you can't stand and discover that you can. Let me tell you about a client who ended 3 relationships because he couldn't stand conflict. Every time a girlfriend wanted to discuss a problem, he'd shut down or leave. He genuinely believed he couldn't tolerate the discomfort of disagreement. Through REBT, we exposed this as false. He could tolerate it. He just didn't want to. We did exposure work where he deliberately stayed in uncomfortable conversations. Practice sitting with the physical sensations of discomfort without escaping. Within months, he could handle normal relationship conflict. His next relationship lasted because he could actually work through problems instead of running from them. Identify 3 situations in your relationship where you tell yourself, I can't stand this, or this is unbearable. For each one, ask yourself, am I actually standing it right now? The answer is always yes. You're tolerating it. You just don't like it. Practice the accurate self-statement. I don't like this, but I can definitely stand it. It's uncomfortable, but I'm capable of handling discomfort. Then deliberately stay in uncomfortable situations instead of escaping. Build your tolerance muscle through practice. Some people confuse low frustration tolerance with healthy boundaries. They're not the same. Healthy boundaries are when you say this behavior is unacceptable to me. and I won't tolerate abuse or disrespect. That's rational. Low frustration tolerance is when you say, I can't stand any discomfort, so I need everything to be easy and comfortable. That's irrational. You should have boundaries around genuinely harmful behavior, but you shouldn't require that relationships be comfortable all the time. Learn the difference, or you'll confuse self-protection with childish intolerance. Low frustration tolerance makes you weak and avoidant in relationships. But the fourth deadly habit is one that most people don't even recognize as a problem. In fact, they think it makes them caring or empathetic. But it's actually one of the most destructive patterns I see. The fourth deadly habit is other rating. This is when you rate and judge your partner as a person instead of evaluating their behavior. And this habit destroys relationships because it creates an atmosphere of constant judgment and conditional acceptance. Let me explain what I mean. Other rating is the cognitive habit of labeling people with global evaluations. When your partner does something you don't like, instead of saying that behavior was inconsiderate, you think they're an inconsiderate person. Instead of that was a mistake, you think they're incompetent. Instead of that hurt me, you think they're a hurtful person. You take specific behaviors and use them to rate the entire person. This is logically flawed because humans are too complex to be summarized with one rating. But more importantly, it's emotionally destructive because it tells your partner, I don't just dislike what you did, I dislike who you are. Listen to how you think and talk about your partner, especially when you're upset. Do you use labels? They're selfish. They're irresponsible. They're cold. They're controlling. They're lazy. These are all examples of other rating. You're taking some behaviors you don't like and using them to define the entire person. The rational alternative is behavior-specific language. They acted selfishly in the situation. They forgot to do something they said they'd do. They weren't affectionate today. See the difference? One is about the person's essence. The other is about specific actions. One creates defensiveness and shame. The other creates space for change. Other rating feels good in the moment because it gives you moral superiority. When you label your partner as selfish or inconsiderate or whatever, you get to be the good person and they get to be the bad person. This simplifies the complexity of relationships into good guys and bad guys. It also justifies your anger. Of course you're angry. But dealing with a selfish person. But this satisfaction is short-lived because other rating doesn't solve problems. It just creates resentment. Your partner feels attacked and misunderstood, so they either attack back or withdraw. Either way, the actual problem doesn't get addressed. When you engage in other rating, you're essentially saying I love you when you act this way, but I judge you as deficient when you act that way. This is conditional love. Your acceptance of them rises and falls based on their behavior. They can feel this. They sense that your love isn't for them as a whole person, but only for the parts of them that meet your approval. This creates deep insecurity. They're constantly trying to avoid being rated badly by you. They hide parts of themselves. They perform for your approval. And gradually, authenticity dies. You're left with a relationship where neither person can fully be themselves. Other rating doesn't just hurt your partner, it hurts you. When you rate people as bad or deficient, you create ongoing anger and disappointment. Every time they do something that confirms your rating, you feel vindicated but also more frustrated. See, they're selfish. You build a case against them in your mind, collecting evidence of their badness. This makes you chronically negative and judgmental. You stop seeing the good in them because you're focused on confirming your rating. You become the kind of bitter, critical person who's unpleasant to be around. The antidote to other rating is what I call unconditional other acceptance. This means you accept that your partner is a complex, fallible human being who will sometimes behave well and sometimes behave badly. You evaluate and respond to specific behaviors. I don't like when you do X, but you don't rate them as a person. You maintain a stance of you're an okay person who sometimes does things I don't like. This doesn't mean you tolerate bad behavior. You can set boundaries and make requests, but you do it from a place of acceptance, not judgment. I accept that you're fallible, and I need you to work on this behavior. That's so different from you're a terrible person for doing this. Let me share the case of a woman who kept calling her husband lazy because he didn't help with housework as much as she wanted. Every time she looked at him, she saw a lazy person. This created a self-fulfilling prophecy. He felt constantly judged and criticized, so he withdrew further. Through REBT, we worked on separating behavior from person. Instead of he's lazy, we reframed he does less housework than I'd prefer. This opened space for actual conversation. Turns out he didn't realize how much the imbalance bothered her. When she approached him without the global rating, he was open to change. They negotiated a fair division of labor, but only became possible when she stopped rating him as a person. Write down 3 negative labels you've applied to your partner or past partners. They're selfish, they're insensitive, whatever. Now, for each label, break it down into specific behaviors. What do they actually do that you're labeling this way? Then rewrite each one behavior specifically. They sometimes prioritize their needs over mine instead of their selfish. Notice how the behavior-specific version feels different. It's less absolute, less damning. It leaves room for discussion and change. Other rating is a deeply ingrained habit, so you need to catch yourself doing it in real time. The moment you notice yourself thinking their so negative label, stop. Ask yourself, what do they actually do? Describe the behavior without the label. Then consciously reframe. They did this specific thing that I don't like, but that doesn't define who they are as a person. This mental correction, done consistently, retrains your brain to evaluate behaviors instead of rating people. Over time, you become less judgmental and more solution-focused. Other rating creates an atmosphere of judgment that kills intimacy and prevents real connection. But there's one more deadly habit, and this one might be the worst of all because it operates completely unconsciously. Most people have no idea they're doing it, but it poisons every relationship they touch. The 5th and final deadly habit is need for approval. This is the belief that you need your partner's love, validation, and approval to be okay. And this habit is absolutely devastating because it turns you into a needy, anxious, people-pleasing version of yourself that nobody wants to be with. Let me break down why this is so toxic. The need for approval is the irrational belief that you require another person's positive regard to be happy or worthwhile. You tell yourself, I need them to love me. I need them to think I'm attractive. I need them to validate me. I need their approval to feel good about myself. But here's the truth. You don't need any of that. You want it, sure. You prefer it. But need? No. Need means you can't survive without it. And you can. The proof? You survived before you met them. You'll survive if they leave. Their approval is wonderful to have, but it's not necessary for your survival or happiness. When you confuse want with need, you create desperate, clingy behavior that pushes people away. In relationships, need for approval manifests as constant validation seeking. You need reassurance that they still love you. You need to know you're attractive to them. You need them to approve of your choices. You need them to notice and praise you. This creates exhausting behavior patterns, fishing for compliments, getting anxious when they seem distant, overthinking every interaction, requiring constant communication. Your partner feels this neediness and it's suffocating. They can't just exist with you. They have to constantly manage your emotional state by providing approval. Eventually, this becomes too much work and they pull away or leave. Need for approval comes from conditional self-worth. You believe your value depends on external validation. When they approve of you, you feel worthwhile. When they don't, you feel worthless. You've given them complete power over your emotional state. This is incredibly unstable because you can't control whether they approve of you. They're going to have days when they're preoccupied, stressed, or just not that affectionate. If your self-worth depends on their approval, you're going to be on an emotional roller coaster. Up when they validate you, down when they don't. This is exhausting for both of you. When you need approval, you develop strategies to get it. You people please, doing what you think they want even if it's not what you want. You hide parts of yourself, showing only what you think they'll approve of. You overcompensate, trying too hard to be impressive or lovable. You manipulate, using guilt, sulking, or passive aggression to extract validation. All of these strategies backfire. People-pleasing makes you resentful. Hiding yourself makes intimacy impossible. Overcompensating makes you exhausting. Manipulation creates toxic dynamics. None of it actually gets you what you want, which is genuine connection. Here's the cruel irony. The more you need approval, the less likely you are to get it. Neediness is unattractive. When you're desperate for validation, people sense it and pull away. They feel pressured. They feel like they're responsible for your emotional stability. And that's too much responsibility for anyone to carry. But when you don't need approval, when you genuinely want it but are okay without it, you become attractive. You're secure. You're independent. You can receive love without clinging to it. This paradox is frustrating but true. You get more approval when you stop needing it. The way to break the need for approval is to develop what I've been teaching for 40 years, unconditional self-acceptance. You accept yourself as a worthwhile human being regardless of whether anyone approves of you or not. Not because you're special or perfect, but simply because you're alive. You have worth that doesn't go up and down based on opinions. When you truly internalize this, your partner's approval becomes a nice bonus instead of a requirement. They think you're great? Wonderful, that feels good. They're critical today, disappointing, but you're still okay. Your worth remains constant either way. Let me tell you about a man who was so desperate for his girlfriend's approval that he monitored her every reaction. If she seemed happy, he was elated. If she seemed distant, he panicked. He'd text constantly asking if everything was okay. He'd change plans to accommodate her every whim. He'd apologize for things that weren't his fault. He thought he was being loving. In reality, he was being needy. She felt suffocated and eventually left. Through REBT, he worked on distinguishing want from need. I want her approval, but I don't need it to be okay. He learned to validate himself. His next relationship was completely different. He was secure, confident, independent. And ironically, that relationship lasted because he wasn't desperately clinging to it. Make a list of all the ways you seek approval in your relationship. Do you fish for compliments? Check their phone to see if they're thinking about you. Get anxious when they're quiet. Need constant reassurance? For each behavior, ask yourself, what do I believe I need from them? Then dispute it. Do I actually need this, or do I just want it? Can I be okay without it? Practice the self-statement. I want their approval, but my worth doesn't depend on it. I can be happy whether they approve of me in this moment or not. Then deliberately reduce approval-seeking behaviors. Stop fishing. Stop checking. Tolerate not knowing if they're thinking of you. Build your tolerance for uncertainty. When you stop needing approval, you become free. Free to be yourself without constantly monitoring their reaction. Free to make choices based on your values, not their preferences. Free to have bad days without it being a crisis. Free to disagree without fearing rejection. This freedom is attractive and creates space for real intimacy. Your partner can relax because they don't have to manage your emotional state. They can be authentic too. And paradoxically, when neither of you needs the other's approval, you probably give it more freely. Because it's not demanded, it's offered. That's what healthy love looks like. So those are the 5 deadly habits. Demandingness, turning preferences into requirements. Awfulizing, making molehills into mountains. Low frustration tolerance, believing you can't stand discomfort. Other rating, judging people instead of behaviors. And need for approval, confusing want with need. These 5 habits will destroy any relationship if you let them run unchecked. But now that you know what they are, you have the power to change them. Let me tie this all together. All right, let's recap what you learned in the last 40 minutes. 5 deadly habits are killing your love life right now. 1. Demandingness, turning what you want into what you demand, creating anger when reality doesn't comply. 2. Awfulizing, exaggerating normal problems into catastrophes, creating disproportionate emotional distress. 3. Low frustration tolerance, believing you can't stand discomfort, making you avoidant and weak in relationships. 4. Other rating, judging your partner as a person instead of addressing specific behaviors, creating an atmosphere of conditional acceptance. And 5. Need for approval, confusing wanting validation with needing it, creating desperate, clingy behavior that pushes people away. Here's what's important to understand. These aren't just bad habits you picked up randomly. They're cognitive patterns based on irrational beliefs you learned growing up, and they run automatically unless you consciously interrupt them. Most people go their whole lives doing these 5 things, wondering why their relationships keep failing, never realizing they're creating their own misery. But you're different now. You've identified the patterns. You understand the cognitive mechanics. You know what demandingness sounds like in your head. You can catch yourself awfulizing. You can dispute low frustration tolerance. You can stop rating people and start evaluating behaviors. You can separate wanting approval from needing it. The question is, will you actually do the work? Because knowing about these habits isn't enough. You have to actively dispute them every single time they show up. You have to catch yourself mid-demand and convert it to a preference. Catch yourself awfulizing and reality check it. Catch yourself saying, I can't stand this, and challenge it with I don't like this, but I can definitely stand it. Catch yourself rating your partner and shift to behavior-specific language. Catch yourself needing approval and remind yourself that you only want it. This is daily practice. This is cognitive discipline. It's not easy, especially at first. Your brain has been running these patterns for years, maybe decades. They're deeply grooved neural pathways. But with consistent disputation, you can create new pathways. Rational beliefs can become just as automatic as irrational ones used to be. And when that happens, your entire love life transforms. Not because you found the right person, but because you stopped doing the wrong thinking. Now, you know the 5 deadly habits that kill relationships. But there's something else you need to understand. These 5 habits don't just show up randomly. They come from deeper core beliefs about love, worthiness, and what relationships should be. And if you don't address those core beliefs, you'll just replace these 5 habits with 5 new ones. You need to understand the underlying belief system that creates all relationship dysfunction. The shoulds and musts and needs that run your entire approach to love. I break down those core, irrational beliefs and how to permanently restructure them. Approach. If this video helped you identify your habits, that video will help you eliminate them at the root. Click it now. And remember, you're creating your relationship problems with your thinking. Change your thinking, change your love life. Stop making excuses and get to work.